unconscious people that may seem to be unconscious, they may be conscious, but they may not exhibit any type of activity that can be registered on our machines, right? That's why most doctors will say, if somebody's in a hospital bed and appears to be unconscious, don't talk negative stuff around them, because they may hear. Because there's been examples of people that have woken up after months in a coma and could hear and remember what people were talking around in the room, conversations. Because, consciousness is a very extreme, subtle thing, and just because a person appears to be even dead, doesn't mean they're dead. If we can't measure it on a machine, probably the person would die, but there are some meditative states that a person can get into, which from external appearance might look like they're dead, but they're actually not. And they can come out of that state and so on.
Is it possible the Buddha mean the mental food, like volition, like a contact, like consciousness, not necessarily mean we humans, for example, have to have this food, otherwise we would die. But could it be without these mental food, and then we will not be in samsara? These are the mental food to sustain the beings in samsara.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's how evolution has occurred. And that's why an arahant, they stop deliberately creating more karma. But they're deliberately choosing that in a very methodical way.
Yeah.
In limiting the food. So they limit their contacts. They don't go running around the city looking, window shopping and all this other kind of stuff, and going out socializing and they go to the forest. They live in the forest. They have natural contacts, just with the wind and the rocks and the trees, and they live more simply to minimize the contacts and to minimize that greed and wanting to do so many things. But they transmute that energy of doing into developing consciousness. That's the main thing. Is it because the average person has no idea about developing their consciousness. And so that's the only thing they know about, is just doing things with the body. Of course, scientists may do something with their mind and study things, but that's different. But a meditator, especially somebody who reaches the paths and fruits and has entered the stream, they're transmuting what would have been just kind of more or less useless or unproductive thoughts and energy, and refocusing that into developing their consciousness. But not an ego consciousness. They're actually removing the ego from consciousness, and then consciousness becomes very expanded and liberated. That's what liberation means. It means being liberated from the ego. And the ego is very confining. It's a contraction of the mind. And so in meditation, we're trying to be aware when the mind's starting to contract around that pain. Oh, my knee, my knee. And just, keeping that distance. Just letting things come and go without trying to grab them with attachment or push them away with aversion. So that's where the equanimity comes in. And then gradually the ego has nothing to stand on, because it stands on attachment and aversion, and the desire and aversion for the sense objects. When that's removed, it starts to melt away. I was going to talk about this later, but it seems I brought it up. Anyway, that's what we observe. So in meditation, eventually when you reach deeper levels of mindfulness and concentration, you can directly observe this process going on in the mind, but it takes a deep degree of concentrated awareness to clearly see all the various ego games and tricks that the ego is trying to play on us in order to hold on to its attachments or hold on to itself. That's why meditation is considered like death, but ego death. Anyway, that's another subject also. So anyway, just these are all things that you may not understand it now, but as you go on, and especially in a retreat, that's why the retreat situation is very valuable and precious, because we don't have, in our daily life, we don't always have the right conditions and the time to spend this kind of time in really trying to understand our mind. Because it's the most valuable and precious thing that later you may not understand it now, but once you get some deep insights, you'll be amazed, blown away, once you really get a deep glimpse of the nature of what consciousness is. Okay, I think we've gone on too long, and